we had been discussing about one of the most important features in our theology and in our faith, and that is Imamat. Last Friday we had a very interesting lecture by our guest speaker Maulana Sayyid Saeed Akhtar Rizvi Sahib. As I said, the institution of Imamat is something which makes our sect distinct from other sects. Not only that, but it gave an impetus to the rise of so many scholarly books and works and theorization, till at last it became a part and parcel of our theology. Now, based on what we heard last Friday, a question is repeatedly asked about whether Imamat, as it stands, is an active institution or a passive institution. In the light of what is being written these days in English, especially by the Orientalists and some of our own writers who are influenced by the Orientalist points of view, it is very important to know that this propaganda, as that Imamat after the martyrdom of Karbala became a passive institution with no activity whatsoever, must be eradicated. It must be understood that it was not so. Towards that, we heard last Friday that despite the apparent very passive role of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam, we know that our fourth Imam has made a definite contribution towards the fulfillment of a particular goal, that so many institutions which we enjoy today are a legacy of our fourth Imam, apparently who led a very passive life. But we are still discussing Imam Ali alayhi salam. When the Prophet passed away, after his death, we must not forget that 2 decades and more passed away before Imam Ali alayhi salam was given that opportunity of becoming a Khalifa ostensibly and openly. For those 2 decades and some years, that means about 24 years, one can very easily imagine that there was a new generation which grew up. Now, when we discuss history, we must understand this, that there was a new generation which grew up. There could be a possibility of certain children having been born in the last years of the Prophet, and suddenly they grew up into young people, grown up, never having heard the Prophet say anything about Hazrat Ali alayhi salam directly. Those who grew up in an environment which did not provide any incentive towards creating love for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Because those who heard the Prophet, they were there. But what about those who were born then, or those who were born after the Prophet, and they grew up into, say, young men of 24, 23 and 20, they considered Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam as a recluse or hermit or a person very wise, but nothing particularly attractive about him. That is one thing which I want you to all bear in mind when we are discussing Imam Ali alayhi salam after the death and passing away of the Prophet. It can happen even today. It has happened in our own society. It has happened sometimes in families. I can give a very glaring example, a very vivid example of my own family. We had an old man who was, say, about 80 when he died. He was the grandfather of practically every cousin of ours. He retired and stopped coming out from the house since 1946. For one reason or the other, he was just not coming out of the house. And in our family, I'm talking of my family, in which there was many children who were born after 1946. Many. In 1966, 20 years after, there was an occasion in Mombasa, Kenya, Jamaat, where the two Jamaats had united after, say, 60 years. On that occasion, the old man came out to celebrate together with the people. And when he came to the Imam Bara, I remember distinctly a young boy of my own family asking me, who is this old man? He did not know that this man, the old man, was his grandfather. Because he just did not come out of the house for 20 years. A boy was born within the family, or he was very young then. He grew up into a young man, and when he stood up to see the figure, he just could not place him. We had to inform him that it's a shame to us, because he belongs to us, and he is the grandfather of yours, my grandfather. He belongs to this family. Well, the boy would say, it's not my fault, we never saw him. We never heard of him. Imam Ali alayhi salam is now in an environment where the newborn generation is coming up. And there was a systematic, methodical campaign against Imam Ali alayhi salam and Ahlul Bayt that served further to mitigate the influence of Imam Ali. Those traditions and ahadiths which were reported from the Prophet describing the excellence of Imam Ali alayhi salam were systematically ostracized. The reason being that if anybody spoke anything about Imam Ali alayhi salam and his excellence, he was told, oh, these are legendary things. The Prophet never said this. Otherwise, it was added. Others were brought in so that the excellence of Imam Ali, the beauties and attributes of Imam Ali were equal to others. Then there was a systematic propaganda against the whole institution of Wilayah and Ahlul Bayt. And all these things brought Imam Ali into a position which was quite secondary to many others. Others were considered to be seen. Today, I am not surprised if I read from the books. Nauzubillah, I can't. But I must say, I should not repeat, but as they say in Persian, naql kufr nabasha, to report something heretic is not to commit any heresy. That the books of Islam, the Muslims have written that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam once led namaz after having drunk. I'm not surprised to see that, because Imam Ali alayhi salam remained in that era, which era was against him, and the children grew up not knowing who he was. Do not be surprised if you read from the books, so-called books, that when the prisoners of Imam Hussein's Ahlul Bayt were brought from Karbala to Kufa, and from Kufa to Damascus, Syria, the people on the road were asking each other who these people were, and when anybody said it is Imam Hussein, nobody knew how Imam Hussein was related to the Prophet. And we find so many stories circulating within the books where the Syrians told each other that Imam Hussein was the brother of Bibi Fatima, who was the mother of the Prophet, and things like that. They just did not know even how to relate. The things were such. The environment. What happened is that there were certain people who faithfully remained with Imam Ali and who systematically went on counteracting the influence, however feeble their voice was, but they went on, and that voice has remained, withstood the test of time, that today we still get those things. I'll give an example. In the mosque of Kufa, years after Imam Ali alayhi salam's assassination and death. A person leaning against the wall was telling the people about Imam Ali alayhi salam. His attributes, his qualities, his relationship with the Prophet, his rights, his excellencies. And one man stands up and says, how is that you are trying to praise a person who had no followers? This gives us an insight into what was happening then. How is that you are praising someone who had no followers in his time? And this alim says, as far as Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam is concerned, the pride is not with Ali for having a number of followers. The pride is for the followers that they have followed Ali ibn Abi Talib. Do you understand that? However handful, but we are proud that we are following Ali ibn Abi Talib. It's not for Ali to count how many are his followers. It is for the followers to say, however few we are, but we are with the right person. So this sort of thing can be traced here and there in history. And Imam Ali alayhi salam lived those 24 years, with the exception of certain occasions when he was called upon to come to the court and solve certain problems, which he did. Why did he do that? He could have acted as an agent of sabotage. He could have just told them that since you have dislocated the whole Khilafah and dislodged me from my rightful position, now you solve it yourselves. But he did not do it. Whenever he was called upon, he went and he served and he answered the questions and he solved the riddle. Why? There is a very vivid example. I do not say that this is Imam Ali alayhi salam's mu'jiza, because I have not thoroughly investigated, nor have I got it authenticated by ulama. But it is reported. It is reported in many ways. But let us say, we take that two women came to claim motherhood of a child. There is a child and there are two ladies claiming to be the mother of that child. They come to the Khalifa. Each says that the child is mine. Now it is very difficult to decide, because they may have witnesses from this side and they may have witnesses from that side. It wasn't a scientific era that today the doctors might assemble and try to find out from perhaps the blood groups and maybe other signs of parenthood. Those were the earlier days when witnesses were summoned and it was found that from both sides it was equally a strong case. Now how to decide? So it is said that the Khalifa said that, all right, I can't decide. And you cannot come to a compromise either. So what I do is that we cut the child into two. And one part is given to one mother and the other is given to the other woman, whoever be the mother. Now what is the spontaneous reaction to this otherwise very unreasonable solution? One who was actually the mother, who had really given birth to that child, stood up and said, "Oh Khalifa, there is no need to cut her into two. There is no need to cut my child into two. I am pleased that you give it away alive to the other." Why? Because the mother, who is really the mother, would never agree to see the child being torn into two, regardless of whether the custody is given to her or not. But this exactly applies to Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Islam was the child born in the house of Muhammad and Ahlul Bayt. It has been usurped, the position of Khilafah has been usurped, taken away. But Imam Ali, as a guardian of that child, which is just few decades old, cannot tolerate to see it being split into two. So whenever a solution was called for, It became his duty as a parent and a guardian of Sharia to guard Sharia and not to allow it to run into pieces. That is why he stood up. Whenever a challenge came from the Christians, the challenge came from the Judaism people, from the Jews. The challenges came from local atheists and agnostics who didn't believe in Allah. Always, it was Ali ibn Abi Talib to come and answer. If there was any matter of commentary on the ayat of Quran and to understand how it applied, call Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Till at last Umar is reported to have said, "O son of Abu Talib, may Allah not keep me alive for a day when you are not there. May Allah not keep me alive for any riddle when you are not there to solve it." That means that they very well knew. But whenever Ali came, solved, he went back. He remained those 24 years as a recluse. But as I said, Abu Bakr was elected, as they say. Umar was nominated. Uthman was elected by an electoral college of 6, which is known as Shura. I can't say 6 because there are some dissidents, but at least I know this much, that there was what they call in Pakistan today Shura-cracy. Whether it is Shura-crazy or Shura-crazy is for the people to decide. But Shura means a council of advisors sitting together. But the most important part in history of Islam is that when Usman was killed, that is the third Khalifa, in Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali alayhi salam describes the scene himself. He says when Uthman was killed, in Nahjul Balagha, Imam Ali describes it himself. The people thronged around me, beseeching and telling me, imploring that, Ya Ali, now it is you and nobody else. And not only that, but Imam Ali alayhi salam gives a graphic description. He says that they thronged in such a way that he uses the word Hasanani, which has been translated in 2 ways. One translation is the toes of the feet, which means that they thronged in such a way, there was such a big rush that even my toes were crushed under the feet of the people. And it has also been translated as referring to Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. That means there was such a big rush that my 2 sons, Hassan and Hussein, were squeezed in the rush. What will be the correct translation? People actually flocked. Ya Ali, come to our rescue. Now, this is an interesting part, that they did not do this for any of the preceding Khalifas. Because in every case, there was either an election which was incomplete, there was a nomination which was imposed, there was an electoral college of 6 which decided. But here there are people of Medina, all of them, from different walks of life, young and old, coming to say that there is only one sage, only one sane person, only one God-fearing man who will take over. Why? There are 2 reasons for this. One, that the preceding role of Khilafat was never satisfactory. And I wish that our students, and especially those who are interested in Islamic history, may carry out a dispassionate survey of actually what happened. Let us not be disillusioned by the stories of conquests and victories, where we are told that they conquered so many parts and annexed so many empires into an Islamic empire. Let us read what happened. To give you a brief example, just a small one, a sample. On the very first day that Imam Ali salam led the prayers, namaz Jamaat, as Khalifa Zahir, Khalifa now in open. The moment he said, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, the first namaz was over. the companions of the Prophet looked at each other and said, we today have remembered the prayers of the Prophet. What does it mean? It means that we have now been reminded of actually how the Prophet prayed. Till the last so many years, we prayed. But this is exactly how the Prophet prayed. That is one thing. Bilal, after the death of the Prophet, had gone away to Damascus. When he came back to Medina, he is reported to have told the Muslims, have you forgotten everything, including namaz? What happened? The brother-in-laws, the son-in-laws, the daughter-in-laws, the sons, the daughters, the cousins and nephews enjoyed the best of advantages from the treasury of Muslims during all those khilafat. And the first task which Imam Ali salam was faced with was to undo the mischief. Nobody realizes this. There were people who had millions and millions from the treasury of Muslims while Muslims were suffering from hunger. When Talha died, among the wealth that he left behind, there were actually bricks of gold. Bricks. I haven't even dreamt of them, have you? Bricks of gold which he left behind, and in order to distribute that legacy among his children and his heirs, the bricks had to be broken so that everybody got his own share. Where did this wealth come from? Most of it came from the treasury of the Muslims, to which every Muslim was an equal partner, an equal shareholder. But there was favorism, there was nepotism, there was what we these days call brotherizations and things like that. It went on in the name of Islam. And when Imam Ali salam came, the first task he was faced with was to undo the mischief. That means those who were drawing fat salary suddenly found that the salary has dried up. Those who were coming there demanding every month by right found out that they would be given nothing. And not only that, but he would say, Imam Ali would say, that I'm not going to take anything out of it. Every man will get just an equal share, because this is the wealth of Allah to which all Muslims have equal share. Now it was something. For last 24 years, a generation has been enjoying a facility which Imam Ali is denying them. It was really a formidable task to complete. We don't realize what Imam Ali had to do. But my hat's off to those people who loved Imam Ali despite his very, very strict justice. Justice in its truest sense of the term. I'll give an example. Hujr bin Adi was Imam Ali Islam's companion. Hujr bin Adi. In fact, he was killed because he loved Imam Ali. He was the one who was present on the 19th night in that mosque of Kufa when Imam Ali was actually attacked by Ibn. He was the only one who was also there. After the shahadat and assassination of Imam Ali salam, he once happened to come to Syria and he came to the court of Muawiyah. Muawiyah, the arch enemy of Imam Ali. And quite jokingly, Muawiyah tells Hujr, "Oh Hujr, Imam Ali al-Islam did not do any justice to you. Your 3 sons have been killed while his 2 sons are still alive." That means Hassan and Hussein are alive and you have lost your young sons. This was enough to taunt anyone. To unsettle anybody's mind. This was just enough. But look at that love and commitment towards Ali ibn Abi Talib. That Hujr bin Adi stood up and said, "Muawiyah, And I haven't done justice to Ali ibn Abi Talib either, because he is killed and I'm still alive. If I really loved him, I should have died before he died. That was the commitment, despite knowing that Ali gave no favors. In Nahjul Balagha, Ali says, Imam Ali alayhi salam, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, says that I saw with my own eyes my real brother, born of one father and mother. His name was Aqil. I saw him and I saw his sons with disheveled hair, dirty clothes, starving actually. They have gone pale with hunger. And he came to me. Now I'm reading this from Nahjul Balagha partly, and partly from the books of history. So it's a combination of what it is. You'll find some of this in Nahjul Balagha. He came to Imam Ali and said, increase my stipend, my assistance, whatever you're giving me. Increase. I have got children and look at them, how they are. The books of history say that he actually invited Imam Ali after some time. When he came there, Imam Ali came there, Aqil said, Ya Ali, let us have some food. And the food was just kept there. Imam al-Islam saw how many types of, say there were 3 or 4. I mean, I can tell you there was no biryani there. That much I can tell you, there was no pilau there. But when I say 3 or 4, for Ali ibn Abi Talib, as we all know, on the night of 19th, when he told his own daughter that, oh daughter of mine, have you ever seen Ali taking 2 types of food at a time? What was there? There was milk and salt. So take one of these away. So when there were 3 or 4, there must have been dates, perhaps dates, khajur. Or there must have been salt and milk or things like that. And it was just there enough for them to eat. And Imam Ali salam said, Aqil, you are telling me that what I am giving you is not sufficient. How did you manage for this nota? Had I been there, perhaps I would have been swayed by that nota. Because this is how people want to buy us out always. If they have got some work to finish with Mullah Sahib, there is no other way but to invite him. Enter his mind through his stomach. Feed him and then tell him, this is my project, and perhaps he will dissolve and melt like an ice or like butter, having eaten your chicken. But this is not the case with Ali ibn Abi Talib al-Islam. The first question he asked is, Aqil, if you had no money, or if the money that I was giving you, allotted to you, is insufficient, how did you manage to invite and arrange for food? He said, Ya Ali, will you believe me if I told you that I have been collecting bits and pieces of these for the last 7 days? For the last 7 days, I have been trying to save dates, 2 pieces here, 2 pieces there, so that today I could bring them before you. Since I have invited you, you are my guest. Imam Ali salam said, if a person can save every day that much as to enable him to invite me, that means he is getting more than he needs. Therefore, whatever you are getting will be reduced, not increased. Because there are Muslims who can't even save this much, while you have been able to save at least. So, Aqil actually could not answer. And Imam Ali in Nahjul Balagha says that then I took a piece of iron and made it hot in the fireside. And after it was red hot, I brought it nearer to Aqil. And Aqil cried and said, Ya Ali, do you want to burn me, scorch me, kill me? And I told, Oh Aqil, you are afraid of this playful test of fire. Don't you know that I have gone to answer in the next world to that Allah whose fire is not a playful experiment? How shall I answer him? Brother of his own. It was a difficult task to undo the mischief of 24 years by strict justice. after the death of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Muawiyah came for Hajj, not with the intention of Hajj only, but he came to see that the people of Makkah and Medina would agree that Yazid was going to succeed him after his death. He came. He was told that there is an old lady here who every day and every time has got no other work to do but praise Imam Ali. So he said, I would like to see this old lady. So the old lady was brought before Muawiyah in Medina. She was really an old lady, a very old lady. And exactly as Muawiyah looked at her, he said, Mother, do you love Ali ibn Abi Talib? She said, there's no doubt about it, Muawiyah. Are you in doubt? He said, did you see him? She said, yes, I saw him. Where? He said, every time he went on Mimbar in Kufa, I used to be there. And Muawiyah, remember one thing, that every time I heard Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, my faith in Islam was rejuvenated, reanimated, refreshed. Every word that he spoke made me steadfast in my faith. He actually polished and glistened my faith. The words that came out of his mouth were such. It came from the bottom of his heart. He acted according to what he preached. So Muawiyah found that he was not talking to an ignorant lady. So he said, well, let us leave this now. And he ordered, give her 100 camels. History says red camels. Now I just cannot evaluate, because we are not in the desert here. We don't know what a camel is worth, and we do not know what is the meaning of a red camel. But the historians tell us that the red camel was supposed to be the superior class of camel. It's just like cars. You can say, all right, he said, give her 100 double R's. It sounds good, no? We might never see one in our lifetime, but sounds good. 100 camels. And the old lady is just looking there. And the camels were brought there, 100 camels, and all of them red, with red hair and mane. And she saw them. And then Muawiyah said, can you equate me with Ali ibn Abi Talib after having received this? At least you should speak a word of praise for me. Because I can tell you, mother, that Ali ibn Abi Talib would never have given you even one. And then the old lady came out in her true color. She stood up and said, Muawiyah, Ali ibn Abi Talib would not have even given me a hair, leave aside a camel. Because it did not belong to him, it belonged to the people. You are going to give me this 100. Do they belong to your father? They belong to the treasury and wealth of Muslims. I swear by that God, by Allah who sent Muhammad and Ali ibn Abi Talib, I am not going to accept even one out of this. Not one, because it does not belong to you. It's not your wealth. It is the wealth of Muslims, and I know that Ali would not have given me even one hair. And that is why I love Ali ibn Abi Talib and I hate him. That is what Ali ibn Abi Talib was as he ascended the throne. He is that father who came home on Eid al-Fitr and found his daughter, not by the name of Fatima. Ali ibn Abi Talib had other daughters also. Found his daughter with a necklace and immediately recognized that this comes from Baytul Mal, from treasury. And he said, oh daughter, I see this necklace glitter in your neck, but I recollect very vividly that it does not belong to you. And she said, yes, father, I just asked your manager, administrator, to lend me this just for the pleasure of wearing it, not for the sake of owning it, just for the sake of pleasure of wearing it on this auspicious day. And the father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, says, daughter, remove it just now as I see it, because it does not belong to you nor to your father. It belongs to the widows and orphans of whole Muslim world. There might be people who are starving, and you just cannot put that on here even for a second. Remove it, let's see, and never do it again. And ask the administrator to account for it and to resign immediately. How dare you do that? It does not belong to Ali ibn Abi Talib. It belongs to Allah. That is why Ibn Khaldun writes in his book, Qutila Ali ibn Abi Talib bi sayfi adalatih. Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was killed by the sword of his own justice. What he meant was that he really was strict, he really was fair. You know, I'm together with you, please don't try to misunderstand me. There is nothing like being a critic, but we are all in the same boat, we are human beings. We like very much to praise justice, don't we? In fact, we tell people, be just, be fair. We like fairness, we like justice, we like equality, we like equity, don't we? But when we become the victim of any equity, when we become the target of any fairness, if we are a party to any justice where we are at a disadvantage, we cry. We cry our disapproval. Whatever is good for the others, not for us. This is exactly what happened at the time of Ali ibn Abi Talib. People told the Prophet. Once when the Prophet was distributing the war share, some Arabs came and said, Ya Muhammad, i'adil. Oh Muhammad, be fair. And the Prophet said, if Muhammad cannot be fair, who else would be fair? You see? So people told Ali ibn Abi Talib, be fair. And when he really was fair and just, fearing none but Allah, there came a time where the people who wanted fairness became his opponents. Because they could not tolerate his strict measures. Well, what he did was, I'm coming to the point and finishing it up, because I'm told that biryani cannot settle in the stomach for very long. It immediately takes the better of your eyes, and gradually you start dozing. Before you start dozing or anybody starts yawning, I must get down. Therefore, the point is this, that the first opportunity of showing what sort of rule it would be if Imam Ma'soom was given the opportunity to rule were those 4 years and 9 months of Imam Ali after the Prophet, to show the world that this would be the sample, this would be how a Ma'soom Imam rules. If you read Nahj al-Balagha, you'll find Imam Ali complaining about the people not understanding, not coming out to support him. They found it very, very difficult. Some of the most reliable people faltered. And when we read their names in history, we are surprised. That how could people of this caliber also falter, go on the wrong path when Imam alayhi salam stood by. This is the reason why this is the first example of what Imam Ali alayhi salam gave as a sample, a specimen of Khilafat that would be. In the forthcoming speeches, I will give certain highlights of Ali ibn Abi Talib's Khilafah from the first year up to the end when he was assassinated. Shahadat came in the 40th Hijrah after completion of 4 years and 9 months, in which the famous battle of Jamal and the famous battle of Siffin were fought, and Jang-e-Nehrawan was fought, in which so many people changed their loyalties. And why then Imam Hassan alayhi salam came to a conclusion which we all know as Sulh Hassan, and how then it climaxed again into Karbala, which we know as Shahada. And after that, the trend of Imamat, as explained by Maulana Sahib last Friday, took that shape and that path, which is the path of Imam Zainul Abidin, up to our 11th Imam, Imam Hassan Askari. Why? There was no ascension to the throne. Why? Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam deliberately did not want to go to the throne when the throne was being offered. Why? these people acted the way they acted. There was nothing like a passive or an active role. The role was the same. As far as Imamat is concerned, it is always active and it works to fulfill the goal. How to fulfill it is, of course, Imam's own prerogative. And it has been fulfilled till today when our 12th Imam ﷺ is in ghaibah and is in occultation, or what they call concealment, not apparently seen by us, till Allah destines him to reappear. The work is going on systematically and it will continue. It has got subtle ways. But the specimen of what would have been the rule was the rule of Ali ibn Abi Talib ﷺ, which begins, as I said today, I've just laid the foundation stone, which begins with undoing the mischief of his predecessors. Justice and fairness in its truest sense of the term, and the result of it. And then we will discuss what happened. I wish that if we haven't got a copy of Nahj Balagha, we buy one and read. If we have copies of Nahj Balagha, we read again. And if we can have classes where we just discuss Nahj Balagha. Many friends of mine read Nahj Balagha and they say, Mullah Sahib, we found nothing there. We just found Imam Ali complaining about the people and all. But first of all, a translation is a translation. If I were to translate Shakespeare into Kiswahili or in Gujarati, even if I were a master of my own tongue, I just cannot convey what Shakespeare or Wordsworth or Byron felt. In the same way, if we translate Mir Anis and Mir Dabir into Gujarati, we lose the whole charm. If you translate Quran Majid into any, or Nahj Balagha or Dua Kumail into any other language, despite all the excellence of the translation, you just cannot convey that warmth and charm of the original. This is of course the case with every classic, and therefore Nahj Balagha is a classic, that there is nothing to equal it in its eloquence after Quran Majid in Arabic literature. And the way it has been conveyed, and the way it has been, and we must also know the history behind what Imam Ali ﷺ said. And in every khutbah, there are so many subjects which he has tackled. The wisdom of Ali ibn Abi Talib is so simple. In small terms, he solves complicated problems, provided we understand him. And from then onwards, we will know, because Nahj Balagha is mainly the product of what he spoke, what he wrote, and what he said during these 4 years and 9 months. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.